How's everybody? Good. Okay, I recognize just about everybody here again. I see two new faces actually. So my name is Chris Cosby. For those of you not here, I am the president of the Michigan Military Technical and Historical Society Museum. I want to thank you for coming to our to this presentation in our winter 2019 lecture series. We have a couple other events coming up, and hopefully we'll be able to attend those as well. The schedules are out on the table for you to pick up, and there are membership forms out there as well, and other lovely things. But this museum is done strictly by the kindness of strangers, and all of our lecture series are by donation only. So if you have not yet, please drop some money in the lovely gray box, so that we can keep the lights on and pay the snowplow bill that just came in. That was somewhat frightening. Does everybody have one of the commentary forms? Anybody not get one? Okay. So today we have Lois, Sprengnether, Keel, doing the World War I Hello Girls. The reason we have these is something that you have, those of you who have come to our lectures have not seen before. We're passing these out because this particular lecture was sponsored in part by the Michigan Council for the Arts and Cultural Affairs and the Michigan Humanities Council of the grant. Okay, Carl. You good? You all set, Carl?
I'm just keep on going, Chris. I'll listen while you're.
So we did get a grant to offset some of the speakers' fees for this, so we have to send in commentary cards to the Michigan Humanities Council so that they stay in we stay in their graces. So please take the time to fill this out and either give it to one of the museum people or set it on the table on your way out. We really appreciate that. So I guess without any further delay, I will turn the floor over to Lois, Sprengnether, Keel. Thank you very much.
can say that Caruso singing in English and in French has a great deal with me having been a hello girl. But maybe I should talk about a song I learned while we were briefly stationed in Great Britain. The Brits sang, "Gassed last night and gassed the night before. Gonna get gassed tonight if we never get gassed anymore. They're warning us, they're warning us. One gas mask for just the 4 of us." Well, I have to say, we didn't have that problem. By the time we got into the war, even our horses had gas masks. The men at first, though, well, the men always had to wear theirs on them. I was fortunate. We were able to take our gas masks and hang them over the side of our chairs. But those first gas masks, well, they were made out of charcoal, and you would have gotten the equivalent of black lung disease. So they changed, and we had different gas masks come along. Now, perhaps I should also say, "Je suis Oleda ne Joure mariée Christides." How many of you know what I said?
I am.
You gave me that much. Those of you who do not speak French, I will try hard not to use it. I might occasionally forget. It's just, it was my French that did all of this. I have a question though for you. Oh, you said you had something, an announcement to make?
I did.
Oh dear.
If you have not yet already silenced your phones, please do so, because this young lady should be the only person here answering phones today.
You're carrying phones with you? My heavens, it's that small? When I started out, it was this small. And this was the one that you would have, and maybe a party line, almost definitely a party line. But I have to say, somebody here has number 2 photo. You need to know your numbers. Ah, there you are. Take a look at his picture. Show it around. This is what the men look like in their gas masks. Well, it looks a little scary, doesn't it? Just a bit. Now, what I said when I said in French was, "I am Oleda." My maiden name was Joure. We were a French-Canadian family up in Marine City. And my married name, I married Chris. That's what we call it. Christides is the last name. So you can see Athanasius Christides was a bit of a mouthful, but that came later. I have to say that Marine City High School was my training ground. And we spoke some French at home, but, well, I knew I needed more. So I paid Father Joure on the weekends to give me even more French. And it's a good thing I did. Now, I knew we had a large family, and I didn't want to be a teacher. Oh, no. No, that was definitely not what I wanted to be. But I didn't want to be a shop girl. So I went looking to see what job I could find because, well, my brother and I, we were weekend musicians in the thumb. You can't make a living like that. So we finally decided we each needed to find real jobs. After the war, he became a Detroit policeman and part of their group that would go around to groups and would sing to you. Because, of course, we wanted the police to be friendly with you. But I was looking to see what I could do, and I decided Ma Bell, Michigan Bell was the place for me. And I eventually, well, I was a teenager, and I learned how to be an operator, and I was going on up. Now, the highest you could manage to be, if you were a woman, was a trainer. And I eventually did get to do that in Lapeer, but I didn't know what all was going to happen, so it's a good thing that I spent 3 years being a telephone operator and learning more French. Because, well, first of all, somebody has number 19. Number 19. It's like bingo. You need to know your numbers.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's got a lot of numbers. Maybe we should share the wealth. Oh, that's a picture of me right there in uniform. Just out of my teens. Just out of my teens.
That's 18.
Somebody has number 19. It shows a long row of operators, like you might have seen in Detroit. Now, no, that's in Paris.
There we go.
Ah, there we are. This is what it looked like, working away at as an operator in Detroit or anything like that. I got to know 4 of the women who were from Detroit with me, and also one who was from over in Blissfield. Actually, 2 were from Blissfield, but 1 worked in Detroit. Now, in the U.S., for every 100 people, there were, guess how many telephones? 2? You're sounding French. In France, they had 1.5. Did? No, actually, it was 14 for us. So we were farther along in France. And, well, there were changes. Now, when you mentioned and showed that little, you say that's a telephone. Okay, well, when he shows that telephone that he had there, I have to tell you, it wasn't until the middle of the 20th century that they got to where that you didn't need an operator. Some of you might be too young to know about that. But, well, somewhere along the line, somebody has a picture number 7 of a very handsome man. Number 7. This is General Pershing. They called him Blackjack Pershing, and it didn't have to do with his playing cards. He was used to thinking out of the box because he had worked with our black troops out west, and when the time came, and we eventually couldn't ignore the war over there. Now, President Wilson had campaigned on keeping us out of that war over there. That was the European war, right? I'll tell you the truth, our Brit friends say we have a habit of coming in late to every occasion, but he eventually said, yes, we would go over there, but we would not just be plugged into where they needed extra troops. You know, the French would like us here, and so on. No, no, no.
Pershing wanted his own.
Pershing said we had to have our own. We were the AEF, the American Expeditionary Force. And so it was that he said we would be separate. Now, I'm glad he did that, but maybe you wonder, how did we happen to get in there in the first place? Well, it was bad enough that the subs started in with sinking boats, including the Lusitania, which had women and children. But then there was the Zimmerman telegram. You know about the Zimmerman telegram. It was from Germany to Mexico, and they were promising all the land they had lost to us if they would manage to take care of us for their purposes. So eventually we couldn't ignore it, and it had been a 3-year stalemate. Somebody has number 6 and somebody has number 26. Number 6 and number 26 show you what a trench warfare it was. Because, frankly, there's one. Look at that. You could be at one end of the trench or at another. Oops, no, that's about Kaiser Wilson. We'll talk about him later. We'll talk about Wilson later. But, was that number 6?
That was 16.
Oh, no, we need 6 and 26.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can see how in those trenches, how bad it was. And so, we were going in there. Now, somebody has number 8. And this is over in France. And you can see General Joure there with General Pershing. Now, by the time we got over there, things had changed considerably in the war. Now, the French taxi cab drivers, when they first heard Belgium was invaded, they all got in their taxi cabs and they rode out to the front to try and take care of things. By the time we got there had been a French mutiny, and the Russians had had a revolution, and so, well, things had changed. In fact, we took the headquarters that the Russians had been in and made that our headquarters. Now, I have to tell you that our headquarters was not in Paris. That was another thing that General Pershing wanted, and I wound up there. I don't know if it was because I was so young or what it was, but I wound up in Chaumont at the Caserne. It was a great, big, enormous stone fortress that I'll talk about in a bit. But the British had better phone connections, and Pershing saw that, and he also saw how awful it was. The French operators expected you to politely parlez-vous a bit, and Well, you can imagine how they felt about us mispronouncing their names. So if you're a soldier and you said you were in this town, do you know what you would say? I'm in Multiplexing. They did not approve. And they only had some of their telephones around, but they also had very few. Well, I have to tell you, you may notice the cross flags on my insignia, both on my cap and on my uniform. I was part of the Signal Corps. Started out with flags, but obviously that didn't last. The Signal Corps, many of the men from the various Bell units around the country joined. But those men didn't want to be operators, did they? Of course not. In fact, somebody has number 17, somebody has number 21, and somebody has number 24. Well, now, sometimes out in the field, there's a man out in the field using a telephone. Oh, and there's some of the men sitting at a switchboard. Now, I can tell you, those men were probably wounded and couldn't manage to keep up with everybody else. And look at this picture here. There they are out in the field. Now, it's one thing to use a telephone in the field, but it's another to be stuck at a switchboard like that. Our men wanted to be doing what they did here in this country. You know what that was? Running wire. Right? Now, I never remember numbers, so that's why I have things here. The French leased out their wires to us. And we put more than 1,700 miles of new wire out there, new pole wire. And there was 22,000 miles out there to begin with. So when you put it together, there was about 38,000 miles of wire. Now, our wire was better than what the French, and certainly what the Germans had. If you picked up what the Germans had, or happened to be next to it, you might hear the conversation. We had what was called multiplexing wire. It meant you could have several conversations at once, and you didn't hear them. And do you know who was responsible for that? A gentleman who wound up being over the Signal Corps, and he was from Lapeer. Now his name spells Squire, S-Q-U-I-E-R, but Major General Square was responsible for that. Years later, after he left Ma Bell, he was responsible for elevator music. Well, that's the Michigan connection a bit, but the fact of the matter was, Pershing didn't want, now sometimes you'd have a 2-hour delay, sometimes you'd have abrupt cutoffs, and you'd certainly have a cutoff if you called it Multiplexing. So Pershing said, we need bilingual telephone operators. And the call went out across the country. Who would be one of those women? Now, there were little au pairs that were here from France maybe, and there were some women who maybe had studied abroad, and it was easier to train them over in Evansville, Indiana, to be operators. There were very few of us who were actually operators and French speaking. Obviously I qualified, right? No, I didn't. It started out that you had to be 25 to 35 years old and not have a husband overseas. Well, I didn't have a husband. That came later. But, well after the war. But I have to tell you, I wasn't 25. Now, they had over 7,000 women apply. Of those, 332 were chosen, but only 223 went overseas. And I was one of them. I was in Unit 6, which was it was the last one to go overseas. And that was because they finally lowered the age to 20, and I just made it. So can you see why, little young thing, they put me probably at the headquarters, I dare say? But that was what happened so that we could manage to have the women. I have to tell you that, well, there is a little bit more I should tell you. Somebody has number 10. Number 10. Oh, this is a good one. This is a picture of what we looked like once we got over there, some of the units. Show it around. Yes, they treated us like nuns. When we went anywhere, we had to go in pairs. We did look like a bunch of nuns. When I went on my leave, I'll tell you about that.
They were blue? They were blue uniforms?
Yes, although eventually they did have some khaki ones. But you know, now I'm glad we're talking about uniforms because you know the facts? We had to supply our own uniforms. I have a summer wear, this is my winter wear. And, well, it was taken, the idea was that we would use the same sort of thing as the Army nurses. And so that was how they decided what our uniform would look like, because we were new to them. They didn't have any idea. I've got my mini blouse on underneath this. I mean, you know, that was it. And I have my insignia. I was there for 1 year. I was a private. And can you tell what our insignia here means? What this is? Anybody guess? Aha! Yes! We were the mouthpiece, right? And of course, this looks as if it's upside down. It's not. It's France, because that's where I served. And I have my crossed flags because the signal corps, which, let's face it, flags would never have worked. But we'll talk about the communication problems later. I have to say that, well, if you were out west, out east, you could take the patterns that they gave and you could go off to one of the department stores and they'd whip you up a uniform, all your uniforms you needed and everything, all your supplies, and supply you. I went to Miss Duddy in Marine City. So this is what she made. Now, out in Montana, wasn't it Montana? Let's see, I always read, oh no, it's Idaho. Emmett, Idaho, Ann Campbell, later Atkinson, had a benefit thrown for her because it was so expensive. Why, it was, well, our uniforms and supplies and everything else like that came to $300 to $500 by the time, somewhere in there, depending on what you got together in your footlocker. And, well, somebody told me that in your money, it's $5,260 to $8,767. I have to tell you, it's no wonder she had a benefit thrown. I went to my parents, and they gave me a loan. The Army, in its generosity, offered to have women have it taken out of their pay if they couldn't manage anything else. We weren't there that long. Can you imagine how much they had to pay? Oh, and because we started out as non-combatants, although we did come eventually to fire, at first they had us wearing white armbands. Now, we were in 75 cities and villages in France, as well as London, Southampton, and Winchester. Can you imagine in some of those, you know, in some places you were in barns, or, you know, over a barn, or you were maybe, you know, in a hut. Can you imagine keeping these clean? Cleanliness was not always possible, so we eventually went to this. But I have to tell you that uniforms coming out of your pay, we got $60 to $72 a month. Our supervisor, Grace Banker, she received $120 a month. Not many of us could manage to have much taken out of our pay. But I have to say, oh, you showed what I looked like back then in my uniform. Oops, no, the first one that you had. That one that, yeah, that one. But I have to say, much as I'm talking about the problems of the uniforms, when we were doing our basic training, we heard from the men what they say. The clothing in the Army, they say, is mighty fine. Me and my buddy can both fit into mine. Oh, I don't want no more of Army life. She, Mom, I want to go. They won't let me go. She, Mom, I want to go home. We didn't have that problem at least. Oh, there was one part of our uniform. Nobody ever inspected that part. We didn't wear it. I don't know if it was part of trying to look like nuns or not, but we had black sateen bloomers for our modesty. I have to tell you, we did wear the woolen underwear, though. Oh, the French standards, especially if you were in some of those far-off places that I mentioned, of heating was not the same as here in the United States. But at any rate, we did go off for training. And somebody here has a picture of the troop train, number 25. We were transported like all the men in these troop trains, packed in like cattle, and hanging out the windows and waving goodbye and all. And off we went for our training. Now, our basic training did include learning how to stand at attention for, it's a good thing, because we had to do a lot of inspection at the headquarters, and I'll tell you more about that later. But we had physical and psychological exams, and the Secret Service did loyalty checks. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm told one hello girl was right at the ship and ready to get on when they took her off. I don't know if she had German background or what. All I know is that's the story. We learned how to stand inspection. Somebody has number one. Yes. We learned all of that. We got our pay from the military, such as it was. We got our hospitalization from the military, which is important. Keep that in mind, by the way. And we got our mail from the military. Now, one of the things that happened was we would be warned about if we did something that we shouldn't do, because we weren't used to being soldiers, right? And we weren't dressed as soldier too, or as private, or whatever. All of that. But if we did something wrong, we were told we'll be court-martialed for that. So we learned pretty quickly. Now, my friend, Louise Le Breton, later Maxwell, she got in trouble and warned that she'd be court-martialed if she didn't stop doing what she was doing. Her communications, her mail and things like that, off to a fellow hello girl in a different spot, told too much. You stop that or you'll be court-martialed, right? You can't give away information. There was somebody who wasn't threatened with court-martial, but she was repeatedly reassigned. Melina Adam fell in love with a fellow Signal Corps soldier. And yes, it was Jack Converse. And, well, he had to go around the country, so seemed like they just kept always running into each other. And I have to say it has a happy ending. After the war was over, they were able to get permission and get married in Paris. But that was at least something where we didn't have to worry about being court-martialed for. Now, one of the things we had was curfew and our leave just like any other soldier. Somebody has number 27. This is a picture from me in Bordeaux when I got a leave of absence, and I was able to visit Wallace, my brother. Now, Wallace and I had both signed up in Marine City. It's, if you look very closely, we don't look very happy, but I had to have Louise go with me when I went because we traveled in pairs. And so that's a picture when I visited him. Now, my brother Wallace was offered, because of his singing abilities, he was offered to be in what later on became the USO, but the Red Cross managed it. So he went around and sang for the troops. I wish I had known about that in time, but I'll tell you more about that in a bit. I have to say that, well, somebody who definitely knew the soldier life wrote a song. Irving Berlin wrote, "Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I'd love to remain in bed. But the strongest, the worst thing of all is to hear the bugle call. You gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up in the morning. Someday I'm going to murder the bugler. Someday they're going to find him dead. I will amputate his reveille and step upon it heavily and spend the rest of my life in bed." I have to tell you, by the time we finished basic training, I believed that song. But we did get on the ship and we did go over. I learned to stop being like a Marine City person and stop calling it a boat, call it a ship. We got on the SS Olympic and we headed off across what the British called the pond. Well, while we were on the ship, rumors started to spread. You know how they do, right? And rumors started to spread that the duration of the war, now remember, they'd already had it for 3 years and it had gone nowhere. Nothing had really changed. I heard that it was going to last another 10 years. I'd be an old maid! I was so upset because I had signed up. When I went to the recruitment office, I had signed up for the duration of the war. I went up and I found one of those lifeboats and I just howled to the heavens. But bad as that might have been, there were other things that were rough on that ship. I was out here. You have a thing from Camp Custer about the Spanish influenza. They just call it the influenza. Now, I don't know where the Spanish part came from, but we didn't want to carry it over to our boys who were going to be in trenches and everything else. It would spread like wildfire. We had men who were buried at sea while we were there, while we were traveling over there. When we got to Winchester, we had to spend 2 weeks in quarantine. And so our 2 weeks in quarantine, I did what you might expect a musician to do. I found a piano and I was playing and I was having as good a time as I could. And those Red Cross ladies came on up to me and said, wouldn't you like to join our units that go around and play for the boys? I said, I'd love to, but I'd be court-martialed. So that, now bad as that was, I have to say, we had time to adjust to the food. Saccharin, no sugar, barley, roasted, no coffee, no sweets, and, well, even when we were on shipboard, we learned to sleep in our clothes because you never knew if the subs might decide to sink our ship. But bad as that was, we didn't have it quite as bad as the first of our women who had appeared over there. Now, I think I have to tell you a little bit about the YW. Now, we all know here U of M, right? And they have dormitories. When I went to the Hotel Petrograd, I met Lulu Taylor there. She had worked in the dorms at Michigan. And so, it was, you never know when you're going to meet somebody from Michigan. I felt right at home there. This was the spot that maybe you would go for your leave or before you were assigned out to where you were going. They had what they called sunshine rooms. There were pianos, which of course I would too. There were the gramophones. There were magazines and books if you didn't want to do that, in sewing areas. Everything to make you happy. Even hot baths and steam baths, which if you were on leave after having been out someplace in France, you appreciated a lot. The Hotel Petrograd was manned by the YWCA. And there was also a place later on that was made, another hotel taken over for the women who were there. Somebody has here a picture of the first women's group. That was number 12. Now, I have to say, the first women, they had all those problems. They had come in, there they are taking a picture of in front, right there in the center of Paris. And they look moderately composed, don't they? Lulu told me women came up to her and their nerves were so frazzled. Not only had there been severe air raids the night before when they got there, and their first night there in Paris, but they had to come across on the ship where they were kept away from the men because they shouldn't fraternize. Well, by the time I got there, we were able to go. The only time they were allowed with the men was at mealtime. And of course, they too had to sleep in their clothing and everything else like that. We changed all of that. Now, some of you are familiar with the Stars and Stripes, the Army's favorite way of telling the men all about everything. I have an article here about the Hello Girls here in real Army duds. Those women that you saw in the square there. Signal Corps colors adorn hats of new bilingual wire experts. They have sergeants too. Yes, we did. Company of 33 regulars, that was the women you saw there, represent half the states of Union. And then there's a little box there that says, Uncle Sam presents Hello Girls. Well, that's what they called us because we were trained by Ma Bell to be the voice with a smile. So when you called and got us, our first things we said was, hello, how may I help you? You know what the men said? Thank God. And that's how we got the name of Hello Girls. We weren't officially that. And the article goes on, and if you wish, you can see it later. But I have to tell you, we didn't have it as bad as those first women did. It was the start of the war for us. And so women came up and they complained about snoring roommates or lost hairpins. because by then their nerves were frazzled. Now I have to say, when my 2 weeks of quarantine were over, we had a rough, now you can go across the channel in nothing, right? Very easily, even back then. But it was mined, so we had to zigzag our way across to get to France. Now, I did learn one other song that was very appropriate, maybe to that kid I've got over there. The British sang a song about pack up your troubles in your own kit bag and smile, smile, smile. Do you know what was next? While you've a Lucifer to light your fag. Smile, boys, that's the style. We speak American, we don't speak English. But at any rate, that was everything there. Now, I have to tell you that somebody has a picture of number 15. And that was Chaumont. This was where we were. There's a picture of the caserne in the background. It's a stone fortress. And that's where we were based. It had been the Russians before us. And then, by the way, somebody has a picture that my daughter Michelle made. And it's in color. She did it, number 30. I usually wait until the end. We'll pick it up again at the end. She chose that picture that you saw there, and she put me right into it. But the concern was a fortress. Our room was maybe about our area that we worked out of. I don't think it was quite half this room even. And well, we were 150 miles. Remember, I said I like to keep track of numbers. For those of you who like numbers, we were on the Rhine-Marne Canal. We were not in Paris. That was not what General Pershing wanted. He wanted us outside of Paris. I think considering all that shelling, I can see why. We were 150 miles southeast of Paris, and well, we were in the first floor in a small room. And somebody has a picture of that room, by the way, number 4. Somebody has number 4. And somebody has number 14. There we are standing inspection. And there we are in our room. You can see our armbands at that time. And there we were. Yes. And number 14 shows you a little bit about us standing inspection. We had to stand inspection because we were the headquarters. And of course, after the war was over with, people came over. I had to stay for a year. I may have been the last over there, but I had to stay for a year afterwards. So the Army did get its use out of me. But we stood inspection for President Wilson and also for Marshal Foch, for the Prince of Wales. We were the last of all the spots to close up because we had to make arrangements for our men to get back. Now, somewhere along the line, I had picked up a song I thought I'd learned to play, but I never got a chance to even learn it. Because we were there so short a time that when I send you a picture of Berlin, you'll know it's over there, I'm coming home. I told you about Caruso. He was a great recruiting agent for everybody when he was singing. Now, when we were in that little room, oh, somebody had the one with the room. When we were in that little room, you'd hear code words, like locations. There was Waterfall and Wabash and Podunk, yes. So picture hearing somebody talking about Podunk or Wabash. And they might be talking about the different chords, so you would hear Nemo or Uncle or Jam. One of our girls walked in one time and she said, you know what this sounds like? I feel like Alice in Wonderland. I've fallen through the rabbit hole. Well, somebody here has a picture of my boss, number 9, Grace Banker. She was a young woman, fresh out of college, and she was the one that Grace Banker was in charge of all of us. She got that munificent pay of $120 a month. And she earned it. She definitely earned it. They came up to Grace and they said, would you like to go near the front? Would we? Well, you'll have to get your women to agree, you know, who's going to be the ones to go. Well, my hat pins aren't working too well. One of the things that we did was we were told, well, we'll take turns. We'll take some of you with us, and we're going to be near the front with our switchboards, right near the action. Well, we all wanted to do it. This was an agreement on October the 30th. Now, remember the first group of women, I didn't tell you, but they arrived, that group in the town center there in Paris, that first group of women arrived March the 16th of 1918. So this was October the 30th. And we didn't know it, but it was less than 2 weeks from the armistice. But she went out with 5 others, and they were less than 15 miles from the front with the First Army. Somebody has number 13. I don't remember what number 13 is. But it has something to, oh, I know what it is. Number 13. Okay, this was the headquarters, this was the switchboard they set up. Now, you can see that the conditions are kind of like, remember those men who were at the switchboard? We tried to keep it manned around the clock. And so it meant, with only 5 women, that it was really hard to do around the clock. And their place that they had was in a shed with blackout curtains so that, of course, you could manage to have a light on and flop into your cot. Grace, by the time she left work one day, she flopped in her cot and she fell asleep. She was so out of it, she didn't even realize that there was a drip coming down. Now remember, this was November by that time. Do you know what that water did to her? It was freezing water, and she was so sound and out, she didn't even realize it until she went to put her boots on. Her feet had swollen. Nobody stood inspection for her for a little while she managed to have her feet finally get back to normal. But I have to say it took her 2 weeks before she could wear her regulation boots. Now, this was what happened at the front. They were shelled, and they were shelled, and they were shelled, and they were told, get out of there. Well, they weren't going to abandon their switchboards, were they? So they kept on working, and they kept on working, and the shelling kept happening. Get out of there, or...
We'd be court-martialed.
You got it. They got out of there. By the time they got back, they only had half their board left. So it was a good thing they got out of there, but it took saying you'll be court-martialed to get them out of there. Well, some of you are probably wondering, now why didn't they just use a radio? We did have radios by that time, right? I mean, we weren't going to use flags. We weren't going to use lights. What were we going to do? Well, the radio. Remember that picture of the trenches? If you were at one end of the trench with a radio and somebody was way off at the other end of the trench, they interfered with each other, and that wasn't the worst of it. They weighed 500 pounds.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So the men weren't eager to do radios. We saved it for what they call intelligence. Now, cryptography didn't come along. Yes, somebody who knows what I mean by that. Cryptography was delayed when I mentioned those code words and things. Actual cryptography didn't happen until the 20s. So that hadn't been invented yet. 1922. But there were runners, there were mounted messengers, some on horseback, some on motorcycle, but there were also sharpshooters. There were also, besides those messengers, somebody has number 5, a rather unusual picture of a pigeon.
Oh, pigeons.
A pigeon.
Yeah.
This pigeon is named Cher Ami. Now, the British pigeon fanciers donated 15,000 trained pigeons to carry messages. Now, some of you, I'm sure, have heard of the Lost Battalion. The Lost Battalion was behind enemy lines, and they started to be, since they were stuck, they were up against an area where they couldn't get out because there were German sharpshooters, and they were starting to get friendly fire. So they took a pigeon, and they wrote a message. The first message was, "Many wounded, we cannot evacuate." The men were told, at best they could manage to pull things off of the men who were shot, but they couldn't even go down to the water because, well, they were in trouble. If they went down to the water, they'd be shot. So eventually they were told, you stop doing that or you'll be court-martialed. So they took a pigeon and they put that message on it, sent him up. Boom! The German sharpshooters knew what those pigeons were for. There were no dummies.
They used them too?
Yes. So number 2, they had a second pigeon because they had 3 pigeons. Men are suffering. Can support be sent? Boom! Eventually, their commander was desperate. He said, for his final pigeon, we are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. I think that should have gotten the message through, assuming the pigeon can get through. Boom! Now, all their pigeons were gone, and they had no way to get the message out. But cher ami, later after dark, with a breastbone shattered, one eye missing, a leg barely dangling by a tendon, it was lost, managed to get the message out. And that pigeon that you see right there is at the Smithsonian. And when they went to stuff it, at first, cher ami was given a medal, French and American, and also was retired. It only lasted about, I think it was about a month. But when they took cher ami and they went to stuff it, it was a girl. Yes. Well, I have to say that was a little bit about our ways of taking care of communications. But on November the 11th, at 11 o'clock, the message came out, La guerre c'est finie, which I think even if you don't speak French, you know what that meant. The war was officially over. The armistice had begun. Somebody here has, I remember you had it.
20?
Yes, that shows you what things were like in Paris. Notice the brocade curtains on the walls and everything else like that? That was where all of the negotiations and things were held in another room, obviously. But it all was held and everybody started the Paris peace talks. And by the time occupied Germany was a fact, by the spring of 1919, some of the women found they'd gotten bored and they wanted to go off to take care of things over there. But I stayed for a whole year and I came back on the ship with number 28, another handsome gentleman. Remember I said our boss was from up here? There he is. That's Major General Square. And he gave me another leave of absence while we were on board. He said we could have it. So I remember him well. Now, you may have seen a picture. I don't have it here, but you've seen it before, where there's flags flying down Broadway and confetti and everything else. They held an official parade. And the Navy recognized its yeomanettes. But when they looked at us, the Army said, oh, you were just contract employees. Now remember, I signed up at the recruiting office. Everything we had was from the military. When that board came under fire, Grace Banker even received a Distinguished Service Medal, and all the other women received certificates of it. But they didn't want to recognize us as being officially Army. Well, they claimed that. You have the part about Kaiser Wilson.
Yes, I do.
That was when the women's suffrage movement came in. And that took a precedent with the 19th Amendment. And then there was a little thing like prohibition that came along that certainly took people's efforts. And then, well, the war to end all wars was not. So we tried to get recognition. And I have to tell you that, well, there was one woman from Michigan, Cora Bartlett, who did not come home. Somebody has number, it's a very small picture, number 29. This was from the Michigan Bell News. There's a picture of Cora there and of her casket draped in flowers. She was one of 2 women who died because the Army didn't vaccinate us for typhoid. Now, the conditions we were under, we needed that. The Army was proud to declare that they'd been vaccinating people since, what was it, I forget. Oh, I don't know.
1911.
Yes, thank you. Because Cora didn't need to die. And so, all of this, we kept saying and saying and saying, but the country was looking at other things. It wasn't until, well, Merle Egan, who had been out in Montana, moved to Seattle. She, by that time, was Merle Egan Anderson. And she found a lawyer, Mark Huff, who was willing to work pro bono to get us recognition. And he did. He sent it off to Washington, and he also sent it to Representative Edith Roger, who had been, she took over for her husband. Say the woman's place is in the House, in the Senate. But at any rate, by this time there were 50 to 70 of us alive, and President Carter signed the bill recognizing us. But it didn't take retroactive. Now, I had gone and tried to join the American Legion, and they said, "Where's your discharge papers?" We didn't have discharge papers. We didn't get our victory medal. We didn't get any of that. So this, for those of us who were alive, qualified. Now, somebody has a picture of a gentleman by the name of General Arthur Wolfe, number 23. I bet you have.
No.
I think I saw it. There was a picture of me there. I saw it.
Number
There
10.
you go. No, right underneath. 16, 23. No, a little further. There we go. 20. Oh, there's 23. This qualifies me to be buried as a veteran.
Wow.
Yes. But somebody, oh, where's that one that I saw there of General Wolfe? I saw it. He's got too many to hold. Okay. There it is. There's Brigadier General Arthur A. Wolfe. And there were only, there were only 70 of us alive still, 50 to 70, we weren't quite sure, but only 18 had actually served in France. And, you know, Brigadier General Arthur A. Wolfe was one of the people going out because we weren't up to going to Washington by that time. So he brought me our promised victory medal. He did. But when I looked at everything and I said, maybe I should sue for back pay. I see you snickering over there. He did not laugh or smile. But we did get honorable discharges. We got everything. And when we got back, and I joined the other 4 girls from Michigan, one of whom, well, she had met somebody over there, and so she, after our memorial service out in Hillsdale, she went out to New Jersey, Norma Finch. But we had our memorial for Cora. And I have to say that when I look at it overall, well, it was a great experience. And, you know, I was a young person, and somewhere along the line there was a song that maybe you've heard that really kind of explains it all. If we can get it. Sometimes we have difficulties waking up this thing. Press play. Now you will hear, you may know somebody else. That's the end of Caruso. Yes, but we'll get this next one. Yes, you faded it out nicely. Now, can you tell what this next song is? They always, back then, all the songs always had long verses at the end of the part that you know. It's coming, it's coming. You just didn't trust. Ah, she's got it. How you gonna keep them down on the phone? And that is what I have to tell you, and I thank you all for listening. If anybody wants to take a quiz, I always carry one with me to test out people who want to test their World War I knowledge.
Shoot.
You can do that. Shoot. Okay, it's multiple guess,
Oh, good.
so that helps. What role did Winston Churchill play in World War I?
None. Yes, he did.
He did
First
so.
Lord of the Admiralty,
He could.
Gallipoli.
Okay, well, there are four choices for you. Drafted the Treaty of Versailles, led the failed Allied attempt to take the Dardanelles Straits,
That's
Prime
Gallipoli.
Minister of England, or led the Battle of the Somme,
Gallipoli.
which was the
Dardanelles.
Dardanelles Straits. What was the Lusitania? A capital of Austria-Hungary, British ocean liner sunk by a German U-boat, Woodrow Wilson's ancestral name, or the first biplane?
British shipyard.
Yes, so you were paying attention, or maybe you knew it anyway. And what country did Germany first declare war on? USA, England, Russia, or Austria-Hungary?
Russia.
Yes, and I have a lot of people who were fooled by that one.
Yeah, I know.
It was Russia. Kaiser Bill didn't trust his relatives. All of these were
Paul von
prominently...
Hindenburg, Battle of Tannenberg, battles around Tannenberg, 1950.
Yes. Don't ever trust somebody who knows military history, that's for sure, because they're going to answer these questions. All of these were prominently featured in World War I, except chemical weapons, tanks, trench warfare, or blitzkrieg.
Blitzkrieg.
That's easy. Yeah, it's blitzkrieg. Archduke, now this is the one that always fools everybody. They think it was declared on Austria-Hungary. But Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the nephew of the emperor and heir to the Austria-Hungary Empire. We know he was shot dead in one of the key incidents leading to the outbreak of war. Where was he assassinated?
Sarajevo.
You got it. I didn't even need to give it to you. Which battle was the longest of the war and lasted 10 months? Somme, Messina Ridge, Verdun, or Passchendaele?
Verdun.
Yes, that was the one. What major change in German policy contributed to the United States entering the war? It was either an end to diplomatic relations with the U.S., declaration of unrestricted submarine warfare, economic sanctions against the U.S., or an anti-British propaganda campaign in the American media paid for by the German embassy.
B.
Submarine.
B.
B, the submarine warfare.
Yes.
Because, you know, even our commercial vehicles were out there, you know, so.
They weren't safe anymore.
But the other factor was the Zimmerman telegram, which urged which country to attack us?
Mexico.
You pay attention, yes, or maybe.
This is fun.
Yes. Who was the commander of U.S. forces in Europe?
Pershing.
You better know that one. One of the peace treaties that was signed at the end of World War I. This treaty ended the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers. Verdun, Trianon, Versailles, Lausanne.
Versailles.
Central powers featured all of the following nations except for which one? Okay, so the Central powers. Germany, Ottoman Empire, Serbia, Austria-Hungary.
Serbia.
You're right. It was Serbia, surprisingly enough, yes.
Well, Serbia is also where Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. Furthermore, what started World War I proper was Austria-Hungary declared war against Serbia after Serbia refused to hand over the people responsible for the death of Franz Ferdinand. Also, Germany entered the war because it was following its treaty obligations with Austria-Hungary.
Right. So, who was the president during World War I?
Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah, Kaiser Wilson. And if you looked at that thing that was a suffragette, she was saying about how you care so much about the German people, but what about the women here? You know?
20 million of them.
Yes. In what year did we enter the war? Did the United States?
17. It was
1917.
1917. We weren't there very long. The British say we have a habit of coming in late to every war.
Yeah, but
We
also
kind of-
with regard to the Zimmerman telegram, not long after the Zimmerman telegram was signed, Pancho Villa raided Columbus, New Mexico in force.
So they were trying to take New Mexico right then.
Well, that was the reason why Pershing went down into Mexico later, as the punitive expedition into Mexico was a direct result of Pancho Villa's raid.
By the way, since you remember all of that, Pershing was out there, remember out west.
Pershing was commander of the, was a captain of the 10th Cavalry, and as a result of that, he was also one of the very few general officers out there that was promoted directly from captain to brigadier general by presidential order.
Did you know that he was the second one put over our forces, however? The first one died. Not because of the military, but he just happened to die. And I always forget his name. Do you remember it?
No, I don't.
You're gonna have to find that one out, because I forget it.
We have an assignment.
You have an assignment, you have homework.
I'm always learning.
Now, this next one, I don't agree with necessarily, but it says how many died in World War I. I'd like to know whether they're talking civilians too, or if they're talking the military or whatever, but it says 17 million, so I'm gonna skip that question. That's what they said.
Oh, that's civilians too.
Which country was not part of World War I? Spain, Japan, Italy, Belgium. Well, we know it was Belgium.
Spain.
Spain, you're right. And by the way, if you want to read a good books, my librarianship is showing here, but if you want to read a good book about that, there's an author, her name is Jacqueline Winspear, and she has a book about a character named Maisie Dobbs, and Maisie winds up in Spain during some of that. And it's a very interesting book to see how things were going about
Well,
that time.
one of the books by Ernest Hemingway deals with an American ambulance driver in Italy during World War I.
Now, what it was considered to be the bloodiest battle of World War I? Verdun, Somme, Tannenberg, or Gallipoli?
That would have to be Verdun.
Actually, this says the Somme.
The Somme, yeah.
And which country made the first declaration of war? Germany, Serbia, Russia, or Austria-Hungary?
Austria-Hungary.
Yep. Germany's attack on which country directly provoked Britain to go to war? Belgium. Yes. We wrote that Britain was like those French taxi cab drivers. Everybody was upset when they went after Britain, after Belgium. The Western Front in World War I is best characterized, now here's where the multiple guess comes in. A stagnant war fought from trenches with neither side gaining or losing much ground in spite of huge casualties. One of the most dynamic wars of the 20th century. The first war front in history dominated by air power. Or a mostly inactive front along which both sides took a primarily defensive stance and resulted in relatively few casualties.
Trench.
It was the first one about the trenches. And that was why it was stagnant. I mean, it just seemed like nobody gained anything. Neither side gained or lost much, but they had huge casualties. Italy's action in the war was primarily against Germany, Greece, Austria-Hungary, or France?
Austria-Hungary.
Austria-Hungary, yep, C. And that is it. You guys do pretty well. Thank you all. I have two other things. One, if you want to, I picked this up when I did the program at the Oakland County Pioneers Historical Museum, and they had sample draft card for World War I to see what questions you were asked. And then on the back, the registrar's report talks about your height, color of eyes, and whether you lost a foot, arm, leg, hand, eye, or both, and if it's eyes, or is he otherwise disabled. And in you went. Now, I have a gift for you if you wish. It's just a little soldier, but it comes with a price. It's free, but I'd like you to put it someplace where it reminds you every now and then to vote or to pray for our soldiers. I have mine on top of my coffee pot, and one soldier in particular to pray for. But if you wish, you're welcome to take one as a reminder of today's program and about our soldiers.
One thing about the Lost Battalion, there were very few medals of honor awarded to aviators. 2 were awarded to aces, but the other 2 were awarded to the 2 American airmen that were able to finally drop a message into the Lost Battalion, and they damn near lost their plane.
They had a hard time. And I do need to get these back. That's yours to keep if you wish. Yeah, she's pointing out that I've got a card about my new programs. I'm working right now on a program about Michigan that will be more of a generic person. I have another person who's real that I do about the Underground Railroad and Civil War. But I'm working on something about prohibition. I'm calling it High Times and the Dry Times, where I look at how the average person was changed by prohibition. Yeah.
One note, blue was the official color of the Army up to approximately the Spanish-American War. And then after that, that's when they developed the brown. But I will also note that the dress uniform of the United States Army has gone back to dress blues. And they now look, the uniform, the outer tunic of the dress blues looks a lot like the Civil War, especially the shoulder straps.
Well, I'll tell you this much. This is a teenager's Civil War sack coat that we just remade a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you what, you
Since
know,
Miss Dunny made the uniform, I've got a perfect example of why, if it's not 100% for World War I, that's why.
you'd be amazed, they were wearing Civil War uniforms clear into the Indian Wars, and they were also wearing uniforms from the Spanish-American War, the Mexican War, all the way into the Civil War.
Wow.
Were the people smaller? Because I read a number
Some were.
of those registration things for the war, and the men were 5'4", 5'4", 5'4". Is that odd? Did anyone do an average? Like,
If you look at what the food was like then, now if you go onto my blog, I've got one article that I have about the food a little bit, and I think it's a matter of nutrition. I really do.
The average height of a Roman soldier, or Roman male, was approximately about 5'5", 5'4".
Wow, and he was probably considered tall.
Yeah, he was. But bear in mind too, they still had their people that were over 6 feet and whatnot
Wow.
back then. In fact, the father of Frederick the Great had what they call the Regiment of Giants, who were 6 foot and over.
Wow.
And he actually went to the trouble, or to the extent of actually sending agents to either entice foreign males who were over 6 foot to join the regiment, or they also resorted to outright kidnap and marry in a good many circumstances.
Oh my. Yes, oh, this is what she's holding up. There's an evaluation form. Please be sure and say kind things. I'm sure that the Arts and Humanities grant that they received here will appreciate that. I am the touring director there.
did you say there was like 230 hello girls that left the United States? That's how many there were?
Unlike our gentleman who's a Toastmaster over there. I always keep,
Notes, okay.
because I never trust my memory for numbers. And there were, let's see, there were 332 chosen, but only 223 went abroad.
Okay.
And not all of those were in France. Some were in London and Winchester and so on like that. And
So that's a
Southampton.
very
Actually, I misspoke. It should have been Southampton was where she was started 2 weeks.
Also, first military aircraft was operated by Signal Corps.